Color grading isn't just the final polish, it's the soul of your image. And in this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to go from flat, boring footage to cinematic, jaw-dropping visuals that finally look the way they felt when you shot them. In this massive course, I'm going to show you every single tool inside DaVinci Resolve's color page, including how to read your scopes like a pro, how to master lift, gamma, gain, use curves, power windows, and qualifiers to sculpt light and color, track moving subjects, build a clean node tree, and unlock the magic of open effects, color space transforms, and so much more. You'll learn every single tool available to do a full grade from start to finish, even if you've never opened the color page before. And I'm not skipping anything. If there's a button, you're gonna know what it does. If there's a concept, I'll explain it, because I want this to be the last beginner color grading tutorial that anyone will need. Now listen, I've gone crazy adding super detailed chapter markers down below, so you can just jump to whatever section you need, or just watch the whole thing from start to finish to finally understand everything in the color page. Let's dive in. All right, when you first open the color page in DaVinci Resolve, it can look overwhelming. It's like you just cracked open the cockpit of a spaceship with dials and scopes everywhere. But here's the thing. Once you know where everything lives and what it does, you're gonna feel right at home here and grading with confidence and speed. In this video, we're gonna walk through the entire color page so you're gonna know exactly what each section is, why it matters, and how it fits into your color grading workflow. And don't worry, you don't need to memorize everything at once, so you can use the chapter markers in the description to revisit any section as you need. And feel free to scrub to whatever it is you're working on today. All right, let's demystify the color page. Now, before we do anything, let's make sure that we're all looking at the same thing. We're gonna head up to the workspace and reset UI layout. Now, we should be looking at exactly the same thing. Your screen might look just a little bit different depending on your monitor settings, but I'll be really clear to make sure that you can find each panel as we talk about it. So front and center, we have the viewer. This is where you're going to watch your footage while making your adjustments. You can hit the space bar to play and pause, and you can loop clips to see how your grade feels over time. You can hit the space bar to play and pause the video, or you have those controls directly in the viewer as well. Most of the time when I'm color grading, I'm going to keep the loop button on, so that way when I play a clip as I'm grading, it'll just keep repeating as I make any changes. So right underneath that, we have all the clips from the timeline. This holds all the clips from the edit page so you can jump quickly between shots and start grading each one without ever leaving the color page. You can show or hide the clips by clicking Clips up here on the top left. A really cool feature is that if you hit the drop-down menu by clips, you can choose to see only specific clips based on criteria or any filter that you want. This is for more advanced users, so just do a quick double check to make sure that you have it set to all clips. Now, down below the clips, you've got your timeline. This shows you a bird's eye view of all the clips in your timeline and on the video tracks that they're actually on. While you can't actually select and move any of these clips around, you can disable or enable a track so you can see a clip that might be below. You can also show or hide this timeline by clicking Timeline on the top right. Now, this area in the middle, this is one that usually intimidates a lot of users. This is your node tree. Now, you want to think of nodes like layers in Photoshop. Each node holds a part of your grade, whether it's your exposure, and then one node for color balance, a separate node for a creative look. So you can toggle them on and off and rearrange your workflow without damaging your original footage. Now you can add a node by right-clicking and choosing Add Node, Add Serial, or pressing Option S or Alt S on Windows. You can delete a node just as easy by selecting it and then hitting delete or backspace. Now we're going to use nodes throughout this course, so you're going to get comfortable with them really quickly. And there's a whole section coming up devoted to just them. Now down here you'll have your primary color wheels. This is your main control panel for adjusting your image. Lift controls your shadows, gamma, your midtones, and gain controls the highlights. And offset adjusts the overall brightness of your entire image. It's sort of like the exposure in photography. Now these wheels are your bread and butter for getting your exposure and color balance right. But if you look just above to the right, you're going to see some options here. The first one is where we are now, the primaries wheels. Then there are also the primary bars, which is basically the same but with a vertical bar and control system. And finally, over here you have the log wheels. Now, log wheels are really similar, but they allow for more precise, gentle adjustments within specific ranges of shadows, midtones, and highlights, which is especially useful when you want to fine-tune your grade without affecting the entire image too heavy. Now, people often get confused as to thinking they should use log wheels or primary wheels. Now, the answer is never use log wheels to start. This is for super precise control, and you should use it towards the end of your grade. If you use it for broad strokes, you're definitely going to ruin your image. Now, we're going to cover all these in this course on a separate chapter. But now, before we leave this section of the color page, let's talk about a few other tabs that you're going to see sitting next to the primaries. because they can be confusing if you don't know what they are. You might not use these right away, but I do want you to know what they do. Now, this first tab is called Camera Raw, and it's only active when you're working with raw video formats like Blackmagic RAW or Red Footage, or sometimes I'm using Nikon RAW. If you're shooting on most mirrorless cameras or smartphones, this option is going to be grayed out. Now, when it's active, this tab gives you direct access to metadata baked into the file, like ISO, white balance, and color space, so you can change exposure and color science without degrading the image. The next one is Color Match, and it's designed for use with color checker charts. If you film with a color checker chart in your shot, like the X-Rite color checker, Resolve can actually analyze the colors and automatically adjust your image to a calibrated neutral baseline. Now, it's not perfect, but it's an awesome shortcut when it works. You just choose the chart type that you used, align the grid over your checker, choose the target color space, and hit match, and it's done. So next up is HDR wheels. Now, this tab is technically designed for grading on HDR content, which is high dynamic range, but I actually use these wheels all the time, even for standard Rec 709 work. What's great here is the precision. So you get dedicated control over things like specular highlights, just the light tones, or deep shadows. It's more refined than the normal lift gamma gain wheels, and if you're struggling with overexposed skies or crushed blacks, this one could be your best friend. So this one here is called the RGB mixer, and it lets you literally rebuild the red, green, or blue channels using any mix of the two. For example, I can blend some green into the red channel to shift the skin tones slightly, or you can rebuild a cleaner blue channel for skies. Now, there's also a checkbox here for monochrome. That's a very powerful way to convert color video into black and white, but with full control over how each color contributes to the final result. So finally, there's motion effects. Now, these are your noise reduction and motion blur tools. Just a heads up though, these only work if you're using the studio version of Resolve. That's the paid version. And it's totally worth it, by the way, if not just for this feature. But if you do have access, temporal noise reduction is fantastic for cleaning up grainy, low light footage. You just want to be subtle with it. And motion blur here can help smooth out fast moving subjects or even add a dreamy cinematic look to drone footage. So most of these tools are more advanced, so don't stress out if they don't make sense yet. But when you see them, I just want you to know exactly what they're for. And later in this series, we're going to go deeper into a few of them, especially the HDR wheels and motion effects. Also, check the description because I got a free quick reference PDF that breaks down each of these tabs into what they do. You can print it or keep it on your desktop for learning. Now heading back over to the bottom right, you can see the scopes. Now, these are essential for professional grading. The waveform shows your brightness levels, the vector scope shows your color saturation, and the parade displays your RGB channels to check color balance. Keeping scopes open helps you grade accurately, and not just by eye. All right, so let's take a second to go through this row of tools just below the viewer. These are some of the most powerful features in the color page, and even if you don't use them all today, I want you to know what they do and where they are, because later in this course and as you level up, you're absolutely going to come back to them. First up, we've got the Curves tool. Curves let you adjust different parts of the image by dragging points along a line. Now, the default is the custom curve. It's great for controlling contrast, but you also have other curve modes here. Hue versus hue, hue versus sat, hue versus loom, loom versus sat, and sat versus sat. Now, these let you isolate and tweak very specific relationships in your image, like changing just the hue of someone's skin tone without affecting anything else. We're going to go over this much more in depth in a later chapter. Right beside the curves, this one's new in Resolve 20. It's called the Color Slicer. Now, this is a more visual way to isolate hues and manipulate them directly. You can grab a section of a color from the hue ring and slice it out. And then you can adjust things like exposure, contrast, or saturation on just that one slice. It's really intuitive and fast for creating stylized looks. Then you've got the color warper, which honestly looks pretty intimidating at first, but once you get it, it's pretty incredibly powerful. It's a 2D mesh where each point represents a hue and saturation range, and then you can literally drag the points around to shift the colors with surgical precision. There's also alternate modes here, like hue versus chroma, hue versus luma, and chroma versus luma, giving you insanely fine control over how your image behaves. It's more advanced, but we're definitely going to dedicate a chapter to this later. This one here is called the Qualifier tool. It's also known as the eyedropper. It lets you select a very specific color or brightness range in your image, like the skin tones, for example, or skies or shadows. And then you can isolate just that part for targeted grading. It's the secret sauce behind a lot of professional work. Then there's power windows. Power windows are awesome. They let you draw a mask, which is a shape, around any part of your image to isolate it. You can use circles, squares, custom shapes, or you can combine it with the qualifier, and now you're controlling just one person's face, or just the sky. Now this one's essential, the tracker. It allows your masks or windows that you create to follow your subject as they move in the frame. So if your actor's walking through the shot and you've brightened their face, the adjustment sticks with them frame by frame. Now, when you open the tracker tab, you'll see a few options up at the top: window, stabilizer, and effects. By default, it opens to window, which is what we're going to be using to track power windows. It tells Resolve to follow the motion of the mask that we've drawn. But if you switch to stabilizer, this is where you can apply Resolve's built-in stabilization, which is insanely good, by the way. You don't even need to go to the cut or the edit page. Just click stabilize and it'll analyze the motion of the clip and try to smooth it out. You can adjust things like cropping ratio and smooth to fine-tune the result. Finally, there's the effects tab. This is where you can track effects that you've applied to a specific area. For example, if you've added a blur to the background using a mask, effects tracking makes sure that the blur stays locked to the background, even if the camera or subject moves. Then we've got Magic Mask 2. Now this is the new Magic Mask that's new in version 2, and it's pretty freaking amazing. You can literally draw a dot on a person and it'll isolate them using AI. There's two modes. There's person and object. So whether you want to isolate a human or something like a car, it's usually just a couple clicks. This here's the blur panel, and it controls things like sharpening or softening parts of your image. You can blur just the background using a window, or you can sharpen someone's eyes. There's also mist and a lens blur effects built into here. It's perfect for adding that dreamy cinematic vibe. Then there's the key panel. This one lets you adjust how much strength the node has, almost like opacity. So you can basically fade the whole grade up or down, or even invert a mask. It's definitely one of those underrated tools that you will use all the time for finesse. Sizing controls the transform of your entire image. So if you want to zoom in, reposition, rotate, or even mirror the frame, you can do that from here. It's especially handy when you're working with a window and want to subtly adjust the subject's position. The last one is 3D, which is likely grayed out for you too, as it is for me. This is part of the stereoscopic 3D grading workflow. It's used for VR or dual lens footage. You can ignore it for now unless you're working on 3D projects, which I'd imagine most of you aren't. All right, so now you've seen the entire toolbar. And while you won't be using every single one right away, I recommend just clicking around and exploring. Don't be afraid to try any of these tools. You can always undo what you've done. I'm going to cover most of them in great detail in the later chapters, and I'll show you real-world examples of when and how to use them. All right, now let's go to the top left of our screen, and you'll see the gallery. This gallery is where you can save what we call stills of your grades so you can quickly match looks across different clips. Now you can organize these into albums for different projects, and if you're working in a team environment, you can share these grades across your network. Next, we've got power grades. Power grades are reusable grades that you can drag onto any project or clip, making your workflow faster and more consistent. So if you develop a grade that you love, you just save it here, and then you can organize them into bins, and then you can use them across all of the projects that you have. Moving down here, you also have your LUTs panel inside the color page. So this is where you can store and preview LUTs that you've installed or created, applying them directly to your nodes for quick look creation or Rec 709 conversions. Now, before we wrap up this tour of the color page, there's one last cluster of tools that we haven't really talked about. It's in the top right section over here, just above the node graph. Now, these buttons give you fast access to some really useful views and functions, and let's walk through them real quick. You've got the Quick Export. The Quick Export button lets you render out your current timeline with just a few clicks, right from the color page. It's super handy for previews or quick turnarounds without going through the full Delivered tab. Now you can select preset formats like H.264 for YouTube or Apple ProRes if you're working on a Mac in high quality, and if you've got a render preset saved, it'll also show up here. It's pretty awesome. This shows or hides your clips across the timeline right below the node graph. If you're working on a single clip and want a bit more space for your scopes or viewer, you can just toggle it off and keep things clean. Then there's the Nodes panel. So this one opens the Nodes panel, which you've seen me using throughout. This is where your grade is built, and if you ever accidentally close this window or it disappears, just hit this button to bring your nodes back. And remember, Resolve won't show your nodes unless a clip is selected. So if your panel is blank, check that you've actually clicked on a clip down in the timeline. Then there's the Effects panel. This is huge. This is your library of open effects plugins and Resolve filters, things like glow, halation, film grain, lens blur, and hundreds more. You can also see third-party plugins here, like I've got Boris Effects or Maxon's Universe Suite if you've paid for them and have them installed. So your panel might look just a little different than mine. Don't worry about that. Now, some of these effects require the studio version, and I'll try my best to make sure to call that out whenever we use one. And last but not least, on the far right, this is the light box. This one gives you a full visual grid of every clip in your timeline. It's great for checking consistency across the whole project at a glance. It's especially helpful when you're batch grading interviews or trying to match exposure and color across a sequence. Just click a clip to jump directly to it. All right, I know it's a lot, but here's the thing. You don't need to use everything on day one. The goal is to know where these tools live and what they do and how they fit into your workflow so you can grow into them as your skills develop. So in this masterclass, we're going to revisit many of these tools in depth, one by one, using them practically on real footage so you'll not only understand what they are, but why and how to use them confidently. Now, don't forget to use chapter markers below to revisit any part of this overview whenever you need a refresher. And if you're ready, let's move on to actually grading using the color wheels and learn how to balance your image like a professional. All right, now that you're comfortable navigating the color page, let's start actually grading by learning how to use one of the most important tools in DaVinci Resolve, the color wheels. Now, the color wheels are your go-to for balancing your image, correcting exposure, and getting your colors where they need to be before we move on to creative looks. And by the way, if you want to jump back to this section anytime, check the chapter markers down below in the description so you can revisit as you practice. Now, down here in the bottom left, you're going to see the primary color wheels. These are your main tools for shaping the overall look of your footage. We've got 4 key controls. There's lift, gamma, gain, and offset. Now let's break each one down so you know not only what they do, but when and why to use them. First up, there's lift. Lift controls the darkest parts of your image, the deep shadows and the black levels. Now before I start tweaking it, I want to show you something that'll make it a little easier to see and understand what's happening. I'm going to pull up one of the scopes that I use most. This is the waveform monitor. Now we go way deep into scopes in a later chapter, but for now, here's the quick version. Think of the very bottom of this scope as all the shadows and dark parts of your image. This is where lift will have the most impact. The middle section of the waveform is your midtones, and that's going to be controlled by gamma. And the top part of the graph is going to represent the highlights, the brightest parts of your image. And that's what gain controls. So as I make adjustments on these wheels, keep an eye on how the scope reacts and how your image reacts. It's a great way to see exactly what you're doing to your image in real time. So go ahead and watch as I pull down the lift. Now notice how the shadows get darker, but the highlights in the image don't change as much. If you look at the waveform, you'll see the lower part moving down while the top remains relatively stable. Now you can see before and after. This helps to add depth and contrast while keeping the bright parts of your image intact. Next we have gamma, and gamma controls your midtones, the middle brightness values of your entire image. So as I adjust the gamma up, notice how the overall brightness increases, especially in the mid-range areas like skin tones, without overly blowing out the highlights or crushing the shadows. Gamma is perfect for brightening or darkening your image without losing detail on either end of your exposure. Third, we have gain. Now gain affects the highlights, the brightest parts of your image. So watch as I pull the gain up. The highlights get brighter, but notice how the shadows stay mostly unaffected. On the waveform, you can see the top part rise up while the lower part stays put. If you have a really flat-looking image that needs some pop, gain is a quick way to bring your highlights to life. Lastly, we have offset. Now, offset basically adjusts the overall brightness of your image across the board. It's sort of like the exposure in photography. As I lift the offset, notice how the entire image brightens evenly. The shadows, the midtones, and the highlights all move together. Offset is great when your entire image is too dark or too bright, and you want a quick global adjustment. So together, these wheels allow you to precisely balance your image, getting your shadows where they should be, your midtones looking natural, and your highlights shining through without blowing out. Now let's talk about color adjustments using these wheels. Now each wheel has a small color control in the center. By dragging this around, you can tint your shadows, midtones, highlights, or the entire image depending on which one of these that you use. So now I'm going to come over here to the lift and you can watch as I add a bit of blue. You can see the shadows take on a cool tone, but notice how the midtones and highlights remain mostly unaffected. Now this is a subtle but powerful way to correct color cast or add a creative mood to your image. Here's a practical example. Let's say that your footage is too warm overall. Well, you can use the offset color control to pull the entire image slightly towards blue, making it feel a little more cool. Or let's say that your shadows look a little green because of the lighting. Well, you can use the lift to pull just the shadows towards magenta to neutralize the green tint, leaving the midtones and highlights untouched. One of the best habits you can develop as you grade is to watch the waveform while you're adjusting these wheels. It's easy to think something looks good until you realize that your blacks are completely crushed or your highlights are clipping. So you want to use your eyes, but trust your scopes to confirm your exposure is healthy. Again, make sure to stick around as I go in depth about scopes later in this tutorial. And finally, remember that you can always reset a wheel if you go too far. Just double click on the wheel and it'll snap back to neutral. All right, well, that's your full walkthrough of the color wheels in DaVinci Resolve. Obviously, using lift, gamma, gain, and offset, you can transform a flat, dull image into a well-balanced, vibrant shot, ready for some cool creative grading. In the next chapter, we're going to dive into scopes so you can learn how to read them confidently and ensure your grades are accurate and professional. If you found this helpful, drop a comment letting me know, and don't forget to check the description for downloadable practice footage and LUTs to follow along and practice on your own. All right, let's keep going and level up your grading skills. All right, now that you know how to use the color wheels to balance your image, let's talk about how you can know that your image is truly balanced instead of just guessing. That's where scopes come in. Now, scopes are essential for any serious color grading. They let you see what's happening in your image in terms of brightness, color, and saturation, even when your monitor or your eyes might mislead you. And I promise you, they will. In this chapter, we're going to break down the different scopes inside DaVinci Resolve, how to read them, how to customize them, and how I use them in a real grading workflow to get professional results. And don't forget, you can use the chapter markers below to come back to this as you practice with your own footage. So to open your scopes, we're going to head down here to the lower right and click the scopes icon. If you don't see it, you can also go to Workspace at the top and select Video Scopes. Now, by default, Resolve shows your scopes in the lower right, but you can also float your scopes by clicking this little pop-out icon. Now, this allows you to drag the scopes anywhere that you want. Personally, when I'm grading, I like to put my scopes on a separate monitor and keep them up full time when I work. I use a 9-scope layout so I can see everything at once without having to switch between them. Now, we're going to start simple and talk about each scope and what it shows you. But first, we need to look at all the options you have when you choose a scope to look at. Now, the toggle here allows you to choose between all the different and very useful scopes. So let's start first with a waveform, and then we're going to look at the Settings tab to the right. You can see in the settings in the first part, you've got the scope type selection. There's Y, CBCR, and RGB. Now, Y stands for luminance only. That's the brightness info. So this is most useful when you're adjusting exposure. Then there's CBCR. These are the chrominance channels. There's blue and red chroma shifts. This helps when you're isolating specific color channels. Then you've got RGB. This shows the red, green, and blue waveforms separately. This is great for checking white balance and color balance. Now, I usually keep this on Y unless I'm really dialing in color shifts. For most exposure work, luminance only is cleaner, and it's also a lot easier to read. Now you'll notice down here there's the colorize checkbox. When you enable this, you can see that it colorizes the waveform based on the image data. Unchecked, you get a clean white waveform instead. It's easier to read sometimes, especially in Y mode. Colorize is great for understanding where skin tones, highlights, or colored light sources sit in your frame. But if it gets too noisy visually, feel free to turn it off. Then there's the extents checkbox. This one shows you the full maximum range of the signal, even if it's out of bounds. This is useful if you want to spot hard clipping or some crushed shadows. Here's a tip. If you're troubleshooting a shot that looks overexposed, but the waveform looks fine, try turning on the extents. It might reveal some extra data that you didn't see before that's being clipped. Next up is the waveform brightness slider. You basically just adjust the overall brightness of your waveform. You drag it to the right to make the waveform brighter, and it's great for visibility in dark monitors, or if you're in a room that's really bright. You can drag it to the left to dim it. Now, this doesn't affect your actual image. This is just to help you see the information better in your scopes. So if you're curious how to use it, if your waveform feels too faint, especially with colorize on, just brighten it up a bit better so you can see the details clearly. Then there's the Graticule brightness slider. These are the grid lines. This one controls how bright the grid lines are and the labels are. This helps with visibility also, especially on external monitors. So this is mostly personal preference. I like my grid lines bright enough to guide me, but not so much that they overpower the signal. Then you've got the Show Reference Levels checkbox. This adds those horizontal lines at the numbers across the screen. Now this will help you see where things fall in your IRE or data range depending on your setup. Now these reference lines are super helpful for skin tone placement, proper exposure, and making sure that you're not clipping. You should definitely keep this on by default. Once you've got those on, you've got the low and high sliders. These set the visible range of your waveform. For example, you can put your low slider down somewhere about here, and then your high you can put up here if you're trying to keep everything within a specific range. Let's say that you're color grading for something and you know that you never want the blacks to dip below here. It's a more cinematic feel if you never go into pure black. So just set the line here as a guide to keep consistent, and then you can do the same for the highlights as well. Now as you grade, just never let your blacks touch that, and never let your highlights touch the top. Then there's the Reset View button. This resets everything to default values in case you get lost or you've tweaked it too far. So if your waveform starts looking a little weird or you've cranked the brightness too far, don't panic. Just hit the Reset View and you can start over. Next, you've got the floating window option right here. If you're using two displays like I always do, you can pop out the scopes into a floating window, and then you can drag it across to your second screen and make it full screen. I even stack all 9 scopes and leave them open full time when I grade. So now let's talk about the actual scopes. Let's start with the waveform. The waveform shows your image's brightness and luminance from left to right. The bottom of the graph represents all the shadows, and the top of the graph represents all your highlights. Watch as I raise the exposure using offset. The waveform moves up, showing that the entire image is getting brighter. And then if I pull the lift to deepen the shadows, notice how just the lower portion of the waveform drops while the highlights remain stable. This scope is perfect for checking your exposure levels and ensuring that you're not crushing your blacks or clipping your highlights. And actually, here's a really useful trick for beginners, and even pros miss this one sometimes. Go ahead and move your mouse to the top corner of the scopes panel and click the 3-dot menu. Click this little 3-dot menu at the top of the scopes panel and turn on qualifier focus. What this does is super cool. Now, if I turn on my qualifier over here, and then if I hover my mouse over the image in the viewer, you can see that Resolve is going to highlight exactly where that color lives on my scopes. You don't have to guess at all what part of the waveform or vector scope you're actually affecting. You can see it live as you move around. Now watch this. I'm going to hover over the skin tones, and you can see the section lighting up on vector scope. That's exactly where that color data sits. But here's a heads up. Don't click, just hover. If you click, it's going to actually activate the qualifier tool, and it's going to select that color range. That's not what we want to do right now. So it's no big deal. I just hit Command Z or Control Z to undo it, and we're back. Next, let's go ahead and look at the parade. Now the RGB parade separates your red, green, and blue channels into 3 separate graphs. Now this is incredibly useful for checking your color balance. So watch what happens as I add red to the highlights using gain. You're going to see the red channels rise above the green and blue channels. The goal is often to keep these channels balanced when you want a neutral image, or you can creatively offset them for a specific look. Next, let's take a look at the vector scope. Now the vector scope shows your image's color information and saturation. The center of the scope is no saturation. If you pull all of the saturation out, you'll notice that it goes right in the middle. That's no saturation of color. And the farther out you go, the more saturated your colors are. You can see the targets for all the colors like red, magenta, blue, cyan, green, and yellow all around the edges. Now this is oversaturated, so you never want your colors to touch these boxes. So that would be way too much saturation. So notice as I increase the saturation, you can see how the blob expands outwards, showing that your colors are becoming more saturated. And here's a pro tip. You should always enable your skin tone indicator in your vector scope. So head to the 3-dot menu in your scopes window and check the Show Skin Tone Indicator. This line shows where natural skin tones should fall, regardless of the person's skin color. This one will help you correct skin tones precisely. So when you hover over your subject's skin using the qualifier tool, you can check to see if the color falls along this line, and then you can adjust it as needed. So let's look at the histogram now. So the histogram is another way to view your brightness levels across shadows, midtones, and highlights, but I prefer using the waveform for its clarity. You can choose whichever one you want. So earlier I mentioned using a 9-scope layout on a separate monitor. I'm going to show you how to set that up now. So once you pop out your scopes, click the layout icon here, then you can select the 4-scope view or the 9-scope view or any view that you want. And this allows you to monitor your waveform, RGB parade, vector scope, histogram, and others all at once. This setup helps me avoid flipping between scopes while grading, saving me time and letting me catch issues instantly. So one of my favorite advanced features is the ability to isolate shadows, midtones, and highlights in the vector scope. So if you use the 9-up version like I am, you can create 3 vector scopes. And then you can toggle these to see what colors are present specifically in just the shadows. And over here I can have just the midtones. And finally, I can set this one up for just the highlights. So this is incredibly helpful if you're seeing a color cast somewhere, but you can't quite identify where it's coming from in your image. So for example, if your shadows have a weird green tint and you can't figure out where it's coming from, isolating just the shadows in your vector scope is going to make it super obvious. And then you can target your adjustment accordingly. All right, scopes can feel intimidating at first, but they're really your best ally for grading with confidence. You're going to learn to trust your scopes to confirm your exposure, your color balance, and your saturation, ensuring that your grades look professional across any device, any monitor, in any environment. So take some time to practice adjusting your color wheels while watching your scopes and see how each adjustment affects your waveform, the parade, and the vector scope. Scopes might feel a little nerdy at first, but once you set them up the way you like it, they become your best friend while color grading. Between toggling colorize, adjusting brightness, and popping them out to a second screen, you're going to be able to see your image in a whole new way. In our next chapter, we're going to move into the custom curves, where you're going to learn how to fine-tune your image with precision for cinematic looks. As always, check the description for downloadable practice footage and LUTs so you can follow along. And feel free to comment below with any questions you have about scopes or your workflow. Let's keep going and build your color grading skills to the next level. So now that you've learned how to balance your image using the color wheels and confidently monitor your work using scopes, it's time to take your grading precision to the next level. In this chapter, we're diving deep into custom curves in DaVinci Resolve. Now, curves are one of the most powerful tools you have for crafting a cinematic look, fine-tuning color, and making precise adjustments that separate your work from a beginner's grade. And don't forget, you can use the chapter markers in the description so you can revisit any part of this video as you practice with your own footage. I know it's a long one. So you can find the curves panel right here beside your color wheels, and if you don't see it, just click this icon here. So what are curves? At their core, curves allow you to control brightness, contrast, and color in a really targeted and flexible way by shaping how input values map to the output values. Now you're essentially telling Resolve exactly how you want your shadows, midtones, and highlights to behave. So if we look at the standard curves graph here, you can see a diagonal line from the bottom left, the shadows, to the top right, which are the highlights. By adding points to this line and moving them, you can control specific luminance ranges with absolute precision. So let's start with a practical use, adding contrast. We can create a subtle S-curve by pulling down the shadows slightly and pushing up the highlights. Notice how this deepens the shadows while lifting the highlights, giving your image punch and depth without crushing or clipping anything. So now try to watch the waveform as I do this too. You're going to see the bottom of the scope pulling down while the top lifts up, visually confirming that you've added contrast. Now, if you go over to the right here, you can see we've got several different types of curves. So next, let's explore hue versus hue. This curve lets you shift one color towards another color without affecting the rest of your image. Say you want your green footage to appear more teal, or you want to shift a red shirt slightly towards orange. You can do that. You can select any color you want in your image, and now you can see a point on the curve, indicating that exact hue range. And now, as I pull this point down, notice how all the colors shift towards a different color. And as I push it up, they shift towards something different. This is incredibly useful for targeted color control, letting you refine your palette absolutely perfectly. Then we've got hue versus saturation. Now let's look at hue versus saturation. This one lets you increase or decrease saturation of specific colors. So here, I'm going to go ahead and select this color again. And then as I pull this point down, notice how those colors are desaturating without affecting the skin tones or any other colors. And as I push it up, notice how they become more vibrant and colorful. This is perfect for taming some overpowering colors in your footage or boosting dull colors selectively. Next up is hue versus luminance. So hue versus luminance lets you adjust the brightness of specific colors. So for example, let's say you want to darken a bright sky for more drama. You can select the blues and then pull this point down. Now notice how the sky darkens while the rest of your image remains unaffected. Next, there's luminance versus saturation. So this curve allows you to adjust the saturation based on the brightness of the image. So you can basically desaturate shadows to avoid noisy colors in the dark areas, or you can boost the saturation in the midtones for vibrance. So watch as I lower the curve to reduce the color in the shadows while preserving all of the saturation in the midtones and highlights. Next up, we've got saturation versus saturation. Sat versus sat lets you target colors based on their existing saturation levels. You can pull down highly saturated areas to tame harsh colors while boosting undersaturated areas to give your footage life. So here's a few pro tips to get the most out of curves. You really want to watch your scopes when adjusting. Use your vector scope to see how color shifts affect saturation and hue precisely. Small adjustments go a long way. Overdoing curves can introduce banding or unnatural colors. Combine curves with masks and qualifiers. You can use a power window or a qualifier to isolate an area and then apply curves for targeted corrections. And we're going to talk about masks and power windows in an upcoming chapter. You can use curves to refine your cinematic look. After adding an S-curve for contrast, you can subtly shift colors to match your desired mood, such as warm highlights and cool shadows for a really cool filmic vibe. So if you want to reset points easily, you can right-click any point on your curve to reset it without clearing the entire curve. So curves are a precision tool that will take your grading to the next level, letting you refine your image and colors with subtlety and control. So take some time to experiment with the different curve types on your practice footage. Watch how your scopes respond and get comfortable using curves to shape your grade. In the next chapter, we're going to dive into qualifiers so you can learn how to isolate specific colors or luminance ranges to make even more targeted adjustments in your grading. As always, check the description for practice footage and LUTs to follow along, and drop a comment below with any questions about curves or your grading workflow. All right, let's keep going, and I'll see you in the next chapter. All right, so now that you're comfortable using color wheels and curves to grade your entire image, it's time to add another powerful tool to your workflow: qualifiers. Now, qualifiers allow you to isolate specific color or brightness ranges in your image so you can make precise, targeted adjustments without affecting the rest of your footage. This process is often called secondary color correction. Your primary correction gets your image looking balanced, while your secondary correction lets you fine-tune specific elements like skin tones, skies, or a bright object that might be distracting. And remember, if you're following along, check the chapter markers below so you can rewatch any section as you practice on your own footage. So what does hue, saturation, and luminance actually mean? Before we jump in, let's break down a few terms you're going to hear a lot. Hue means the actual color itself, like red, blue, or green. These are hues. Saturation is how intense or muted a color is. Highly saturated colors are vibrant, while low saturation looks washed out or grayish. Luminance is how bright or dark something appears, regardless of its color. Now, these three attributes, hue, saturation, and luminance, define every color you see, and qualifiers let you isolate colors based on these parameters. So you're going to find the qualifier tool in your toolbox above the color wheels. It looks like an eyedropper icon. DaVinci Resolve offers a few types of qualifiers. There's HSL, hue, saturation, and luminance. This is the most common and intuitive, letting you isolate colors based on these three parameters. Then there's also the RGB. This one lets you isolate colors based on the red, green, and blue channel values. Then there's also luminance. Luminance lets you isolate parts of your image based on brightness alone, regardless of color. Now, most of the time, you're going to use the HSL qualifier for skin tones, skies, or specific objects. So let's say we want to isolate skin tones so we can adjust them without affecting any of the background. I'll grab the eyedropper tool and then I'll click on the skin in this image. You can see the Resolve creates a selection around just that hue range. Now, to see what you're selecting, you can toggle highlight mode. Areas shown in color are selected. Areas in gray are excluded from our mask. Now, this is an essential step when working with qualifiers, so you always know exactly what you're affecting. Now, you're often going to need to refine your selection to get a clean, accurate isolation. The hue range adjusts the specific color range that you're selecting. The saturation range helps you exclude very dull or vibrant parts if you need. And the luminance range lets you limit your selection to certain brightness ranges, like isolating only the midtones of your color. Now notice as I adjust these sliders, the highlight view changes, showing more or less of the subject's skin being affected. Now these sliders help refine the edges of your selection. Clean black removes unwanted specks and noise in the unselected areas. Clean white will fill in any holes in your selected areas. Now watch as I increase the clean black, you'll see the speckles disappear in the gray areas, helping keep your selection clean. Now you can also use the blur radius slider to soften the edges of your selection so that it blends naturally into the rest of your image. Now once you've isolated the area that you want, you can use your color wheels or curves to adjust that part of your image. For example, I could change the skin to completely green like the Hulk. Or to be realistic, you can warm up the skin tones just slightly using the color control, and notice how the background remains completely unaffected. This is what makes qualifiers so powerful. Targeted, clean adjustments. Now you can combine qualifiers with power windows for even more control. For example, if you want to adjust a person's skin tones, but only in a specific area of the frame, well, you can draw a circular mask around your subject and use your qualifier inside of that mask. Now here's some pro tips for using qualifiers like a professional. Use the vector scope with the skin tone line. Now, after you isolate your skin tones, go head over to the vector scope and make sure you align your skin tones to the skin tone indicator for a natural color. Do this while only your skin is selected so you can get a perfect match. Make sure to avoid harsh adjustments. Over-adjusting qualifiers can create harsh edges or color artifacts. Use subtle changes and watch your highlight mode. You can use hue versus hue or hue versus saturation curves on just the isolated area for additional targeted refinement. And use your scopes actively. Watch your scopes to ensure you're not unintentionally affecting colors outside of your target. And also make sure you label your nodes. When using qualifiers, label your node clearly, like skin tone adjustment if that's what you're doing. This will help you keep your node tree really organized. So qualifiers are an essential tool for precise professional color grading, allowing you to refine your image without affecting the entire scene. Take some time to practice isolating colors and luminance ranges in your own footage, using your highlight mode to monitor your selection, and watch how your scopes respond as you make subtle adjustments. In our next chapter, we're going to explore power windows and masking in Resolve, learning how to guide your viewer's eye and make your subject stand out. Don't forget to check the description for practice footage and LUTs to follow along. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions about using qualifiers in your workflow. All right, let's keep building your grading skills, and I'll see you in the next chapter. In this chapter, we're adding another essential tool to your color grading toolkit: power windows. Now, power windows let you isolate specific parts of your image to adjust exposure, color, or contrast exactly where you want it, guiding your viewer's eye and making your grades look cinematic and intentional. And remember, if you need to review this chapter later while practicing, check the chapter markers below so you can quickly jump back to any section. So what is a power window? A power window is a mask, and it lets you select a specific part of your image, so your color corrections only apply to that area. Now, this could be your subject's face, it could be the sky, or the edges of your frame for like a vignette. You can find your power windows in the toolbar above the color wheels right here. Now, there's lots of different types of power windows. There's a circular window, which is perfect for faces or round objects. There's a square, which is great for general shapes or areas. There's a polygon, which lets you create a custom shape with multiple points, and you can add points to it. There's a gradient, which is useful for sky adjustments or gradual fades. And then there's a curve. This one is for freehand custom shapes. Now, you can use any of these depending on the shape of the area that you want to isolate. So let's add a circular window around the subject's face. So you can click and drag to reposition it, and you can adjust its size by dragging the handles and also change the shape. You can rotate it to align exactly how you need it. Next, we want to feather the edges so our adjustments blend naturally with the rest of the image. So these dotted lines around the window control the feathering. If you pull them outward, you can soften the transition, ensuring you don't get really harsh lines in your grade. A good rule of thumb is to use generous feathering unless you need a precise, hard edge for some creative reason. So if you want to see exactly what's inside your window, you can toggle the mask view by pressing Shift-H. This way you can see what's going to be affected and what won't be on the viewer. You can also click to see the actual mask with this button here. Everything white will be affected and everything black is going to remain unchanged. Now, this helps you refine your window placement before making any adjustments. So now that we have our window in place, we can adjust the exposure, the color, or contrast, and it's only going to affect the area inside of this window. So watch as I lift the gamma up slightly, and you can see the subject's face brightens while the background remains untouched. This is perfect for drawing attention to your subject and creating depth in the scene. Now, sometimes you want to adjust everything that's outside your window, like darkening the background. So you can reverse your mask by clicking the invert button here, but there's a more advanced and better way. So let's undo that. To do it better, you can add what's called an outside node. We're going to right-click on the node with your power window on it, and then choose Add Node, Add Outside. Resolve will automatically invert your window so your adjustments apply outside of the selected area. So now I can pull down the lift to darken the background, making the subject stand out even more, while I can still have the brightness adjusted on the node before. So now, because we're doing video, if your subject is moving, you can also use Resolve's tracker to help your power window follow them automatically. And the tracker is awesome. With your power window selected, go to the tracker panel and then hit this button to analyze the track. So Resolve is going to track your subject frame by frame, keeping the window aligned as your subject moves through the entire shot. It's crazy awesome, and it saves a ton of time and keeps your grades clean and even in moving shots. Now, here's some practical examples of some power windows. You can add subtle vignettes. Use a large circular window, invert it, feather generously, and lower the exposure to guide focus towards the subject. You can isolate skies. Use a gradient window to darken or add contrast to skies without affecting the foreground. Selective color adjustments. Combine power windows with qualifiers to refine specific areas even further, such as isolating skin tones on a moving subject. Here's some pro tips for using power windows like a pro. Label your nodes clearly, like facelift or vignette, to help stay organized. Use generous feathering for natural blends, and make sure you combine with your scopes. You always want to watch the waveform to ensure your adjustments stay balanced. You can animate it manually if you have to. If automatic tracking for some reason fails, you can adjust the window's position frame by frame for perfect control. So power windows are an essential tool for professional color grading, letting you guide the viewer's eye exactly where you want while keeping your grades looking clean and cinematic. So take time to practice drawing windows, adjusting them, and tracking them on your practice footage so you can add them confidently to your workflow. In the next chapter, we're going to take things a step further and learn about tracking in DaVinci Resolve, letting you track grades, windows, and effects across your footage seamlessly. As always, check the description for downloadable practice footage and LUTs, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions about using Power Windows effectively. All right, let's keep building the grading skills, and I'll see you in the next chapter. So in the last chapter, we used Power Windows to isolate areas in our image for precise adjustments. But what if your subject is moving or your camera's panning? Do you need to adjust your window frame by frame? Thankfully, DaVinci Resolve has power tracking tools that let your windows and grades follow your subject automatically, saving you hours and ensuring your grades stay perfectly aligned. So what is tracking? Tracking simply means analyzing motion in your video so that DaVinci Resolve can automatically move your mask, your grade, or your effect along with your subject. Now, this is essential for maintaining consistent professional grades in shots with movement. Now, you'll find the tracker in the color page right here below the node tree. So let's say we've placed a power window around our subject's face to brighten them up. So if the subject moves or the camera pans, the window will stay in place by default, just missing your subject. To fix this, we can track the window to follow the subject. So with your window selected, simply click on this button in the tracker panel to start tracking. Now Resolve will analyze the motion in your clip and move your window automatically to stay on your subject. So watch how the window now follows the subject naturally, keeping your grade exactly where you need it throughout the clip. It's super easy. When you're in the tracking panel, look right below the viewer and you're going to see 3 tabs. There's Window, Stabilizer, and Effects. Now these tabs switch between different types of tracking modes depending on what you're trying to stabilize or follow. So Window is the one you're going to use most often. It tracks any power window mask that you've drawn, allowing it to follow your subject as they move, whether it's a face, a car, or anything else you're isolating for color correction. Stabilizer is used to smooth out shaky footage. So instead of a tracking window, it analyzes the motion of the entire frame, and then it applies counter movement to stabilize the shot. So if your handheld footage feels jittery, this is where you can fix it. Then there's Effects. This is used when you're tracking the open effects, like glow, lens blur, or flicker removal to specific parts of your shot. So if you've added a blur to somebody's license plate, you'd use the effects tracker to keep it aligned as the car is moving and driving by. So let's take a look at the updated tracking tools in Resolve 20. You're going to notice 3 main options here. There's Cloud Tracker, Point Tracker, and IntelliTrack AI. Now each one's suited for different scenarios. The Cloud Tracker is what you're going to use most of the time when tracking power windows. It analyzes motion inside the shape, like a face or a background element, using a flexible point cloud system. It's great for general purpose tracking, people moving, hands, cars, and it tends to hold really well even through some moderate occlusion or even some lighting shifts. It's pretty good. Now this one here gives you tracking controls like pan, tilt, zoom, rotate, and perspective. You just hit the track forward and reverse and let it do its thing. It's fantastic. Then there's the point tracker. If you need super precise tracking for something small or detailed, like the corner of a phone or a logo on clothing, that's when you'll use the point tracker. So this one lets you manually assign specific points in the frame to follow. It's pixel accurate and perfect for attaching effects or grades to something tiny that's moving. Just make sure that your tracking points have really good contrast or movement can get lost. Then there's IntelliTrack AI. This one leverages DaVinci's neural engine to automatically track entire objects, faces, or body parts with almost no setup. It's kind of like magic masks, super intuitive. Just click on what you want to track and the AI handles the shape, the motion, and the edges for you. It's great for tricky shots where traditional tracking might fail. Here's a pro tip. This is amazing for fast client work where you just need to isolate a person or object with minimal effort. Now just to review, you want to use Cloud Tracker for most power window motion, Point Tracker for detailed surfaces or screen replacements, and IntelliTrack AI when you want to get super clean motion tracking without any fiddling around. Now you can stabilize also using tracking. So tracking isn't just for masks, it can also help you stabilize shaky footage. By analyzing the motion in your clip, Resolve can smooth out camera shake to make your footage look more professional. While we're going to cover full stabilization workflows later, just know that the same tracking technology helps really well here. You can also use tracking alongside qualifiers. For example, if you want to isolate the skin tones using a qualifier, but your subject moves, your selection might slip to other colors that are similar. So by adding a power window around your qualifier selection and tracking it, you can keep color adjustments aligned with your moving subject and just within inside that tracking window. So here's some pro tips for tracking like a pro. You always want to check your track. Play back your clip to ensure the window follows correctly the entire time. You can use manual adjustments if needed. So if Resolve loses the track for some reason, you can adjust the window position for specific frames. Feather your windows. Soft edges help you blend your adjustments even if minor tracking errors occur. And you combine this with scopes. Always watch your waveform and your vector scope while tracking to ensure consistent exposure and color throughout your entire shot. Don't forget to label your nodes clearly, like face track grade or something like that, so your node tree stays organized. So tracking is one of those tools that'll save you a massive amount of time in your workflow while keeping your grades looking professional, even in complex shots with movement. So take some time to practice adding windows, tracking them on moving footage, and playing with qualifiers combined with tracking so that you feel confident using these tools in your next project. In our next chapter, we're going to explore creative OFX effects for color grading. Learn how to add subtle polish and cinematic enhancements using DaVinci Resolve's built-in effects. As always, be sure to grab the downloadable practice footage in the description so you can follow along. And drop any questions about tracking down below. All right, let's keep going, and I'll see you in the next chapter. All right, now that you're comfortable with balancing curves, qualifiers, windows, and tracking, it's time to add another layer of creativity to your color grading. Right now, we're going to dive into OFX effects in DaVinci Resolve. OFX stands for Open Effects, which is an open standard for visual effects plugins that allow different software, like DaVinci Resolve, to use the same types of effects and filters. In simpler terms, OFX is a framework that lets you apply creative visual effects directly inside the color page without needing some kind of external software. Now, before we dive into specific effects, let me just say this. There are dozens and dozens of effects available in DaVinci Resolve. So don't be overwhelmed if you're seeing names like Prism Blur or Color Compressor that I don't cover here. The truth is, you don't need to know every single one right away. The best thing you can do is actually just start dragging them around on a node, playing around, try them out, and see what they do. Some effects will make sense immediately, and others you'll probably never use, and a few might just become your secret weapons for cinematic polish. Now that's what this part of the page is all about. Creative experimentation. That said, in this section, I just want to show you the essential effects that I think every beginner should learn. And I want to demo how they work in a real-world grade so you can see how you could use them with intention. You can find the OFX in the color page on the right-hand side at the top by clicking the Open Effects tab. You're going to see a long list of effects that you can drag and drop directly onto your notes. Now, keep in mind, you might see more or fewer effects than I do here in my system. Some effects require DaVinci Resolve Studio, the paid version, while others are available in the free version. Additionally, I have a lot of third-party plugins like Boris Effects and Maxon, which are awesome, and they add a lot more effects to my list that I can use in professional projects. If you see me using an effect you don't have, don't worry. The concepts are exactly the same, and you can use the built-in effects that you have to achieve similar results. And one quick note before we start is that OFX effects can be GPU intensive, and they're really going to slow down your playback, especially on high resolution footage. So if your system is struggling, just think about disabling a node temporarily as you play through the rest of your footage, or you can go up to playback, render cache, and smart while you're editing. All right, so let's look at some OFX effects that I use in my grading workflow every day, and I'm going to show you how to apply them and adjust them. So the glow effect can add a soft cinematic bloom to your highlights. As I add it to a node, watch how it creates a subtle dreamy highlight. You can adjust the threshold to control what brightness levels are affected, and the spread to adjust how soft or broad the glow appears. It's a super great effect. It's awesome for music videos, beauty shots, and adding subtle highlight bloom for a really filmic feel. Film grain adds a really authentic texture to your footage, helping you reduce the digital look, and it adds a layer of real professional polish. So I'll apply film grain here, and you can see how it creates a fine texture over the image. Use all the sliders, the strength and size to match your footage's resolution and desired aesthetic. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here and exaggerate it because YouTube's compression is pretty tough, so you might not be able to see it. But film grain can really unify your grade and help blend shots together. Then there's lens flare. Lens flare is awesome, and it can add a subtle stylized light flare to your footage. So you really want to be careful not to overdo it though, but when used carefully, it can add energy to highlight areas or backlit scenes. You can try using it to add like a warm flare to a sunset or a subtle highlight accent in a product shot. And don't forget, it's super easy to track a lens flare in the tracking tab we just talked about by choosing the FX option and then adding a point to track. It can't be easier to make a flare to follow a flashlight, a car headlight, or whatever you want. Then there's the color space transform. Now this one's not a creative effect on its own. The color space transform is essential if you're working with log footage from cameras like Sony, Canon, Nikon, or Blackmagic. This tool converts your log footage into a Rec. 709 color space, giving you a proper looking image to start grading from without using a LUT, which can sometimes clip or distort colors. Now, you want to make sure that your input and output settings match your camera specs. So if you're not sure what setting to use, just check your camera manual or look it up or just hang tight. This is a huge concept and it goes beyond this beginner's course, but I just want to let you know what it is and where it is. I'm actually going to create a full video dedicated to color management, which is really important, and we're going to cover DaVinci YRGB versus color managed, ACES workflow, and how to match your footage for multiple cameras and all that other really confusing stuff. So hit subscribe, click the notification bell, and if you're watching this in the future, that deep dive might already be out, so be sure to check my channel and the end video screens of this video. Next up is halation. Now, halation can add a subtle red glow around highlights, simulating how real film reacts to light. This is super subtle, but can add warmth and authenticity to your footage, especially for narrative or cinematic work. Then there's dehaze. The dehaze effect can help clear up foggy or low contrast footage. You could use this when you need to add clarity to landscapes or backlit shots, but use it sparingly to avoid a really crunchy look. So hopefully just the quick few that I have shown you here gives you an idea of how amazing the OFX effects are in DaVinci Resolve. Once you get comfortable in Resolve and decide to upgrade to the studio version, there's lots more effects that just become available. And there's unlimited third-party ones that you can download whenever you're ready. So let's talk about some use cases for OFX in your workflow. Subtle glow enhances beauty of shots. You can use it for wedding films or really emotional moments. Film grain unifies digital footage with a cohesive, organic texture like film. Lens flares add energy or accent light to scenes creatively. Dehaze can fix low contrast or misty shots. Halation adds filmic authenticity to narrative pieces. Color space transform creates accurate color managed workflows before creative gradings. And here's some pro tips for using OFX like a pro. Use OFX effects on separate notes to keep your workflow organized. So if you're using glow, halation, and film grain, you should make 3 new nodes, 1 for each. Don't forget to label your nodes clearly. So if you've got glow, call it glow. If you're using film grain, call the node film grain. Just keep it specific and simple so you can make easy adjustments later. Use subtlety. A little goes a long way. OFX can look cheap and amateurish if you overdo it. Preview with and without. Always sit back and toggle the nodes on and off to see if the effect is genuinely helping your grade. Use scopes while applying effects to ensure you're not unintentionally clipping highlights or crushing shadows. All right, OFX effects in DaVinci Resolve can add a polished cinematic layer to your grades when used with intention. So take some time to experiment with things like glow, film grain, lens flare, and other effects on your practice footage, and find ways to incorporate them into your workflow naturally. In our next chapter, we're going to explore stills, power grades, and LUTs in DaVinci Resolve so you can save your grades, apply them quickly to other clips, and build a consistent professional workflow. As always, grab the downloadable practice footage and LUTs in the description so you can follow along. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions about using OFX in your grading workflow. All right, let's keep going, and I'll see you in the next chapter. So now that you know how to build beautiful grades using wheels, curves, windows, tracking, and OFX, it's time to talk about speed, consistency, and workflow efficiency. In this chapter, we're going to learn all about using stills, power grades, and LUTs inside DaVinci Resolve so you can save your grades, apply them across clips, and build a consistent look for your projects without having to start from scratch every single time. So what are stills? A still in DaVinci Resolve is like a snapshot of your grade at a specific moment in your clip. It captures all the nodes, corrections, and the effects that you have applied. Now you can find your stills in the gallery here in the top left of the color page. If your gallery isn't open, click Gallery to reveal it. And if you don't see the folders on the left, you want to click this little icon in the far left corner so that we're all looking at the same thing. So to grab a still, simply right-click in your viewer and select Grab Still. Then you'll see a thumbnail appear in your gallery. Now this still contains your entire node tree and the grading adjustments. So if I make a few new adjustments and I create a new still, you'll see that I have 2 new options to choose from. So this is great if you want to apply the same grade to another clip. You can simply select the new clip that you want to add it to, and then you middle mouse click on the new still that you made. And then you can see your grade is going to apply instantly. Now this saves a massive amount of time and helps maintain consistency across your project. And as with everything in Resolve, there's a couple different ways you can do things. You can also just click and drag the still onto the clip in the viewer to do the same thing. So you can also use these stills to compare your current grade with a reference image. So click on the still, and then you can click on the split screen icon right here, and Resolve is going to display a split screen for comparison. You can even move the center and change how it views in the split screen to your preferred method of working. Now this makes it super easy to match your current clip's exposure, color, and overall feel to your reference image. So what are power grades? Now, power grades are just like stills, but they live in a special album within your gallery, and they can be accessed across every project inside DaVinci Resolve. So click on the Power Grade album here in the gallery. You can basically drag your favorite stills into this album, and then they're going to be available whenever you open Resolve, making them perfect for your signature looks or grading templates. And you can easily delete them by just selecting it and hitting delete or backspace. So basically, stills will just stay in the project that you're working on in that moment, but if you develop some look that you love, you want to save it as a power grade, then you can quickly apply it to future projects. So what are LUTs? LUTs stand for lookup tables. It's basically a preset that transforms the colors in your footage based on a defined mathematical formula. So LUTs can help with technical conversions, like converting log footage to Rec 709, but they can also provide creative looks for speed and consistency. So you can access LUTs directly inside the color page by clicking this LUTs panel here, and you've got LUTs to choose from. To apply a LUT, you simply drag it onto a node in the node tree, and then you'll see the look applied instantly. Now, something to be aware of is that LUTs can be super strong, so you're probably going to want to adjust the exposure or use a key output gain to control the intensity. So here's some best practices for using LUTs. Always correct your footage's exposure and white balance before applying a creative LUT. Use LUTs on a separate node so you can toggle or adjust their intensity easily. And don't rely on LUTs alone. They're best used as a starting point for your creative grade. So here's some use cases for stills, power grades, and LUTs. You can match multiple shots. Use stills to ensure consistency in lighting and color across the whole scene. Speed up your workflow. Apply your signature power grades quickly to new projects. Create and sell looks. You can develop your own LUT packs to share or sell. Build a grading pipeline. Now, use technical LUTs for log conversion, then apply your creative power grades for look development. Here's some pro tips for workflow efficiency. Make sure to organize your gallery. Create albums for different projects or clients, and name your power grades clearly so you can remember what each look was for. Combine LUTs and power grades. Apply a log conversion LUT, then add a power grade for your creative adjustments. Use reference stills. Use split screen comparisons to keep your projects look completely consistent. Make sure to back up your power grades. They live inside Resolve's database, so export them if needed for safety. Stills, power grades, and LUTs are powerful tools that will help you maintain consistency, speed up your workflow, and bring a professional polish to your grading projects. So take some time to practice grabbing stills, applying power grades, and experimenting with LUTs on your footage to build your grading confidence. In our next chapter, we're going to explore workflow tips and organization strategies in DaVinci Resolve so you can keep your projects clean, fast, and stress-free as you continue leveling up your color grading. As always, grab the downloadable practice footage and LUTs in the description so you can follow along, and be sure to drop a comment below with any questions about using power grades, stills, or LUTs. All right, now we're ready to dive into our chapter all about nodes and how and why you would use them. So by now you've seen us use nodes throughout this masterclass, but today I want to slow down and really understand what nodes are, why they're essential, and how you can use different node types to build clean, flexible, professional grades in DaVinci Resolve. Nodes can feel really confusing when you're starting out, but once you understand how they work, they become your best friend for organized, creative grading. So what are nodes? In DaVinci Resolve, a node is sort of like a layer in Photoshop, but with more flexibility and control. Each node will hold a part of your grade. Exposure adjustments in one, color balance in another, curves in a different one, a power window in one, an OFX effect. You get the idea. You can basically toggle them on and off without affecting other parts of your grade and see what you've done. You can rearrange or disable your nodes easily if you change your mind. And you can even combine nodes for advanced looks without getting stuck with destructive edits. So you can find your node tree right up here, and by default, every clip starts with a single node. You can add new nodes by right-clicking and choosing Add Node, or you can use the keyboard shortcut like Option S to add a serial node quickly. Now let's talk about serial nodes. A serial node is the most basic node type. It processes your grade in a straight line, one node feeding into the next. Think of a serial node like a pipeline. Node 1 might adjust your exposure, then that information goes into number 2, which might handle color balance, and then that goes into node 3 to add a creative look. Now this keeps your workflow organized, and it lets you isolate each adjustment. Then you've got parallel nodes. A parallel node basically allows you to process multiple grades at the same time, side by side from the original, and then it combines them back together. For example, you might use one parallel node to adjust the shadows, then another one to adjust the highlights, and a third for midtones. And you can do these with power windows too. This way, each one isn't affecting the next one and compounding the effect. In every one of these nodes, you're getting your image from the previous node that has a perfectly clean image. Then Resolve takes all of them together and blends them cleanly. Now, this is super useful when you want to make separate corrections without one affecting each other like a chain. Then you've got layer nodes. A layer node allows you to stack nodes like layers, and then you can blend them using different composite modes. For example, you could add a creative look to one node, then you can select the skin in another adjustment that won't be affected by the other node, Then you have the ability to blend them together by right-clicking on the layer mixer and using Add, Overlay, or Screen Composite, or any of these modes for advanced looks. Now, this is similar to using blend modes in Photoshop, and it's something that you just need to experiment with and see how it affects your image. There's lots of them, and they do lots of different things. Then you've got a key mixer node. A key mixer node allows you to combine or blend masks and key outputs from different nodes. So if you have different masks in different nodes, like a face mask and then a background mask, you can use a key mixer to combine them both into one node for complex selections. This is a fairly advanced way of working, and it allows you incredible control over every single part of your image. So let's talk about how to use nodes in a practical workflow. Here's a simple, clean workflow that you can use in most projects. Node 1, exposure and contrast corrections. Node 2, white balance and color balance. Node 3, a creative look or a LUT. Node 4, you do your skin tone adjustments, often using a qualifier or a power window. Node 5 could be a vignette or background adjustments using a window. Node 6 might be your effects like glow or film grain. By splitting your grade across nodes, you can toggle them on and off, adjust individual parts of your grade easily, and keep your workflow flexible for client revisions or personal refinement. Here's some pro tips for using nodes like a pro. As we've said throughout this entire course, you want to label your nodes clearly. Right-click and change the node label here. You can also use colors for nodes to visually organize them. So right-click, node label color. Use serial nodes for logical steps, exposure, color, look. Use parallel nodes for clean separate adjustments when you need it. And you can use layer mixers for advanced look blending. So keep your node tree tidy, just delete unused nodes and align them clearly. And finally, you always want to use your scopes to monitor every node's impact so you don't unintentionally break your grade. All right, so nodes are what make DaVinci Resolve such a powerful grading tool. They give you complete control over your image while keeping your workflow non-destructive and organized. So take some time to practice building some different node trees. Use serial, parallel, and layer mixer nodes and watch how much more control and confidence you'll gain in your grading. And just remember that you don't need all these types of nodes in your grades. So don't feel overwhelmed if you don't understand them all right now. Just play around with them, and if you want more deep dives into advanced concepts like these, just let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to do it. So before we wrap up this chapter, let's touch on something that will save you a huge amount of time as you grow in color grading. You want to find a consistent node tree structure that's going to work for you. So what do I mean by a structure? So when you're grading an entire project, whether it's a short film, a music video, or even a YouTube series, you're going to often have dozens, sometimes hundreds of clips. Now, if the structure of your node tree is different on every single clip, you're going to waste tons of time hunting down what node contains your exposure, where do you apply your skin tone fix, or where you added your vignette. It's just a lot going on. A consistent node tree lets you know exactly where to find each adjustment across every clip in your project. It'll really help you troubleshoot quickly when something doesn't look right. It also helps you refine looks systematically without missing details. So here's an example of a consistent node tree. Node 1, exposure and contrast. 2, white balance and primary color. Node 3, creative look or LUT application. 4, skin tone adjustments with qualifier window. Node 5 could be a background vignette or local adjustments. And node 6 could be OFX or a final polish. So now that you've created this node tree, don't make any actual adjustments to it. Just keep each node empty and then save this whole structure as if it was a real grade. Put it in your power bins, and then you can literally just copy it onto one or all of your clips in one click, and you're ready to go. Now, you might wonder, if I do have a consistent node tree and a clip doesn't need a vignette or an effect, should I delete those empty nodes on specific clips? So if you're confident you're never going to use that adjustment, deleting nodes can help keep things clean. However, it's perfectly fine to keep placeholder nodes in your structure for consistency across all your clips. Now, personally, I recommend keeping your nodes consistent even if certain nodes are unused for some clips, as long as your system is organized and labeled clearly. Now this way, if you later decide to add a vignette or an effects, you know exactly where to place it, and it's the same on every clip. You will refine your system as you experiment, discover your workflow preferences, and find what helps you move efficiently while keeping your grades clean and flexible. Now I have a standard node tree that is project specific, depending on how complex I expect the project itself to be. So to help you get started, I've created a starter node tree that you can import into your DaVinci Resolve project. You can find the download link in the description below. This includes labeled nodes for exposure, white balance, look, skin tones, vignette, and effects. I've added some layer and parallel nodes just to get you started. It's totally ready for you to adjust, expand, or simplify as you discover your workflow. So be sure to click the links in the description and download it for free. All right, so take some time to practice applying this node structure in your project clips and tweak it as you learn. You're going to find grading becomes much faster and more organized and stress-free. As always, grab the practice footage in the description so you can follow along and drop any questions about nodes in the comments below. All right, you made it. You've just completed this full beginner masterclass on color grading inside DaVinci Resolve, and if you stuck with me this far, it tells me two things. One, you're serious about becoming a better filmmaker, and two, you're officially part of this channel's creative community now. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I've got more advanced breakdowns, full cinematic walkthroughs, and deeper dives into color management, Magic Mask, Fusion, and more, all coming soon. So keep creating, keep learning, and I'll see you guys in the next video.